It's recording?
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine. I can trim the heads and tails.
Okay.
My name is PsychoMelanephy, and I met someone who became my husband when we were both training together at Fort Meade, Maryland for the U.S. Army. Now, life was really good back then. He had a first wife that he had left because he said his first wife was psycho. Anyway, we started dating after he was divorced, and then he would take me on dates to the Washington, D.C. area and Baltimore's Inner Harbor near where Fort Meade, Maryland were. So we eventually got married. Our first date was at a hockey game. The Buffalo Sabres. Who were the Buffalo Sabres playing that day? I can't remember, but it was the Buffalo Sabres. That's half of who was playing. But then 19 months later, we got married, and it was small. We went to a courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia. And all was fine for several years. He deployed to the war in Iraq, and I finished out my enlistment in Europe. Then we moved together and cohabitated. Now, one interesting thing about Brian Melanephy, or as he's called by my friend, Brian Man Who Has to Pee, is he was very cheap. When we went places, mostly I would buy, he would buy sometimes, but he was very stringent about keeping bank accounts separate. I thought that was cool. I don't care. Because the two things spouses fight over is money and children. So if we keep the money separate, we don't have to fight about it, right? So when he got back from Iraq, we cohabitated like married people and lived in Orange County, California, and then it was fine for several years. Then he took a job in Hawaii and became psycho. When he took the job, he didn't tell me he was taking it. He just left one day. So then I was left with all the bills, and everything that used to be paid by both of us was just being paid by me. So anyway, come to find out, he took on a mistress who lived in Indonesia, and he would visit her on government time when the government was paying for that with my money. He took money out of the joint account to finance the affair, and he had his government laptop because he's a commissioned officer in the United States Army, so he was sent on official orders to places like American Samoa, and Indonesia, Malaysia. And he took this he took this mistress to Kuala Lumpur. And I found out about the affair of all places on Facebook, which many, many people do because people get careless and post things they're not supposed to post. So it turns out he was taking the mistress into his government-sponsored hotel room, and this is about the time when the Marines and the Secret Service agents were being caught with hookers down in South America, in Colombia. So I found a phone bill that was $93 over, and $93 is a fortune to him because he's so cheap. He never would spend a penny. And he was taking her to Kuala Lumpur with his dad. His dad was visiting. He's a retired Navy officer, so his dad would visit him. Now, he took her into the government quarters, which is illegal. These are punishable offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. When you're in the military and you do these things, it's illegal. She's a foreign national. She's from another country, and she was in a government hotel room. It was paid for by the U.S. Army, and he was supposed to only be in there by himself because he would leave her alone with his laptop, and on his laptop were things that only someone with an officer security clearance, top secret, can see. And he lied. He drained the bank account, and then he asked me, before I knew this, he asked me to come over to work on the marriage at an Army-sponsored retreat. So he waited for the government to pay for me to go over. And he said, "Oh, love is like a roller coaster, and sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen." So I left there and came back to California, and then he sent me divorce papers. So one time when we were still married, my friend David took us to dinner for my birthday, and I went to the bathroom when we were at the restaurant, and I came back, And later, David had told me that when I was away, Brian said that we had talked extensively about having kids. We never had such a conversation, never, not once, because Brian didn't talk, never talked about anything. But David also said that Brian would teach me how to shoot, that he was a better shooter than me. Now, I was in the military, I fired expert pretty well, but David was also in the military, and he taught shooting. I guess Brian wanted to impress him and said that he would take me for remedial training to the range because I was a horrible shooter, and he was the one that taught me how to shoot. But I've been to the range. I think shooting's fun. It's a hobby. You can see I'm not a bad shot. I only have one non-kill shot right here, and those are pretty much through the same hole in the head. So I know how to fire a weapon, and the point is, he had delusions. He would have delusional behaviors, but I did research later on, and I spoke with people, and I got counseling, and I learned that he's passive-aggressive. I mean, when you're dealing with a passive-aggressive person, they tend to be sociopaths. There's no conscience. They don't feel any guilt, and they will put guilt trips on people, and they will manipulate them to get what they want. But they do it so well that you don't know what's happened until they've already taken everything. So what I'm trying to do, and what I've been trying to do, is get him in trouble with the U.S. Army, because the offenses are punishable. Adultery by itself is punishable, although it's usually tacked on to something else. He stole assets. It was my money. It was thousands of dollars of my money that he took. And he committed crimes when security violations when he had her in the hotel room. But it's just all kinds of things. And he posted the pictures all over his Facebook account, which is really ridiculous. That's a very childish, stupid way to be caught. But after this happened, we're not in touch anymore, because after this happened, someone who's genuinely psychotic, I think, doesn't know they're psychotic, and they think everybody else is the problem. So we haven't been in touch at all. In fact, I'm convinced that I'm dead to him. I have no meaning at all to him. He probably even forgot my birthday and our anniversary. He always thought we were married a year later than we actually were. But I'm working, hopefully, with the U.S. Army to be able to teach him a lesson, to strip some of that rank off, if not discharge him completely. Because I think he's a bad influence on troops to be leading troops into war if he can't even tell the truth, and if he can't even lead a life of integrity.
Cut! Are you off or turn off the camera?
Just hit the video, that camera.